The room smelled of roses and vanilla. The air was heavy, filled with the scents of flowers, perfumes, and something else elusive, disturbing. I was sitting in front of a large antique mirror, looking at my reflection. The flickering candlelight flickered on the smooth surface, giving everything an almost ghostly appearance. The white dress lay in soft waves, delicate and airy, like the foam of the surf. It was exactly what I dreamed of as a child, with a long train, thin sleeves embroidered with pearls, and lace trim that looked like frosty patterns on glass. The veil, weightless as a breath, touched her shoulders like a light cloud. Everything looked perfect. But something was wrong inside me. I ran my fingertips over the lace on my wrists, trying to calm myself. My heart was beating too fast, too loudly, and it wasn't the kind of pleasant thrill that brides experience before a wedding. It was different. Excitement? Fear? Insecurity? I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Her gaze, hidden under long lashes, was tense, and her lips trembled slightly. I wanted to believe that it was just nervousness, the usual excitement before an important day, but anxiety held me tenaciously, as if invisible hands were squeezing my chest. There were sounds outside the door, muffled voices of guests, occasional bursts of laughter, the clink of glasses. Music started playing somewhere in the distance, and I realized that the time was approaching. Very soon, I have to leave this room, walk down a long aisle, stop in front of the altar, meet the groom's gaze, and say the cherished yes. Groom. I closed my eyes, imagining him. Tall, handsome, confident. His smile is flawless, like people who know what they want. His touch is always a little insistent, but warm. He knew how to say the right things, he knew how to charm. With him, I always felt like I was living in a beautiful fairy tale full of gifts, trips, and romantic dinners. But why was there an icy lump in his chest right now? I remembered his gaze, attentive, tenacious, penetrating. I remembered how he squeezed my hand during the rehearsal of the ceremony. It doesn't hurt, but it's strong. As if to remind me that I belong to him now. I was startled. It's okay, I whispered to myself. Just nerves. I looked in the mirror, hoping to see the bride there, full of joy and happiness. But instead, I saw a girl who looked like she was about to run away. There was a knock on the door. I shuddered, pulling myself out of my thoughts. May I? It was a friend, one of the bridesmaids. I recognized her voice and tried to put a calm expression on my face. Yes, come in. The door opened softly and she entered, carrying with her the scent of perfume and the slight excitement inherent in the guests on the eve of the ceremony. Everyone is already waiting, she said, coming closer. Are you ready? Are you ready? I nodded, even though my stomach was clenching. Of course. My friend smiled and began to adjust the folds of my dress. You're just gorgeous, she said admiringly. All the guests are delighted. The groom, too. He looked so eager. I swallowed. Really? You bet. Just look at you. Princess. She turned me to the mirror, but I hardly saw my reflection. My eyes glided over the white fabric, over the veil, but did not linger on my face. It was like I was a ghost in that dress. We have to go. I took a deep breath, trying to deal with this strange feeling. It didn't go away. I took the bouquet and we left the room. The hallway was quiet. Long candles and candelabra cast warm light on the walls, creating soft shadows. The music came muffled through the closed doors of the hall. I walked slowly, steadying my breathing, trying to convince myself that it was just excitement. But then I saw him. He was standing by the window, a little away from the general commotion. Tall, with dark eyes, dressed in a strict dark suit without unnecessary decorations. Unlike the rest of the guests, who were chattering in anticipation of the ceremony. He was a stranger in this picture, and that's why he immediately caught the eye. I didn't know him. He looked at me, and I felt the world freeze for a second. That look. He was kind of weird. There was something dark, deep, and dangerous about him. Not in the sense of threat, but rather in the sense of knowledge. It was like he saw right through me. I slowed my pace, holding my breath. He didn't look away either. Who is he? Why is he looking at me like he knows something? I didn't have time to understand anything. My friend pulled me by the hand, pulling me out of this moment. "Come on," she said. "Everyone is waiting." I took another step forward. But before I turned the corner, I looked at him again. He was still standing there. I was still watching. And I suddenly had a feeling inside that this stranger would somehow change my life. The corridor led us into a spacious hall filled with people. The guests moved between the tables, talking softly. The laughter, the clink of glasses, the subtle scent of champagne in the air, all this should have seemed joyful, but I felt like I was inside someone else's dream. My friend was saying something, adjusting the folds of my dress, but I couldn't hear her anymore. I knew he was here somewhere. My body was ahead of my mind. I turned my head, looked for him, as if it was inevitable. And then, in the shadow of a column, a little away from the general fun, I saw him again. Alien. His dark eyes met mine, and it seemed to me that for a second the world shrank to this single point. There was no more time. Just that look, penetrating, knowing, embarrassing. Why is he looking like that? I almost didn't realize how my legs were carrying me closer. An unconscious step, then another. My heart was beating loudly, as if before jumping into the unknown. "You don't have to marry him." The voice was low, calm. Not at all like what a stranger's voice should be. There was no question, there was no doubt. Only confidence. I blinked at him. "What?" "You don't have to." He stared straight at me, unblinking. I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what to say. It was an absurd phrase, ridiculous, strange. And at the same time, I felt something tremble inside. "Who are you?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just stood there, letting me read something in the depths of his gaze. I wanted to say it was stupid. That I love my fiancé, that I'm happy. That it's just the excitement before the wedding. But for some reason, the words wouldn't come. "If you leave now," he continued, "you won't regret it." I clutched the bouquet, feeling my fingers turn white. "You don't know me. Do you know him?" This question pierced me. I wanted to say yes. I should have said yes. But for some reason I couldn't. I stood in the middle of a luxurious hall, breathing in the air, saturated with the smells of expensive wine, flowers, and the sweet icing of a wedding cake. Guests scurried around, laughing, raising glasses, saying beautiful words to each other. Everything was exactly as it should be. Except for me. The stranger's words stuck in my head like a splinter. "You don't have to marry him." I felt like my fiancé was somewhere nearby. He was talking to the guests, laughing, clutching a glass of champagne in his hand. I could feel his presence, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to look for his gaze. Instead, I was looking for someone else. The stranger was gone. I turned, scanning the crowd. He was gone. It was as if he had disappeared, leaving me with thoughts that I shouldn't have been thinking that day. I took a step back, then another one. Where's the exit? I heard someone calling my name. The voice was familiar, soft, but at that moment it sounded like a sentence. They were looking for me. They waited. "The first dance will begin soon." My legs carried me away on their own. The hallway was empty. Her breathing was labored. I didn't know what I was doing. She just walked, faster, faster, until the white fabric caught on the edge of the carpet. I stumbled, almost fell, but strong arms caught me. I knew who it was. I looked up and met dark eyes. "You came," he said. There was no surprise in his voice. I didn't answer. My chest was heaving, my thoughts were racing, but my body already knew the answer. At that moment, the groom's voice rang out from the audience. He was calling for me. I was startled. The stranger slowly extended his hand. "Are you coming?" The feeling that I was standing in front of an abyss became almost tangible. But haven't I felt it since this morning? I held out my hand. We ran. The wind whipped at my face, tousled my hair, and clung to my veil, but I didn't care. The long hem of her dress tangled in her legs. The white fabric flickered in the dark like a reflection of moonlight. We were running. The night was cool, the air was fresh, as if nature itself was washing away the burden of the day from me. My heart was beating so fast that it seemed like it was about to burst out of my chest. Finally, we reached the car. The stranger quickly opened the door. "Sit down." I froze for a second, looking at him. Everything was happening too fast, too crazy. But isn't that what I wanted? I sat down. The door slammed, the engine roared, and we took off, leaving behind the party, the guests, the wedding hall, and the man who was waiting for me at the altar. I waited for him to say something, but he didn't. He looked at the road, focused, confident, calm. Unlike me, I was breathing heavily, feeling the blood throbbing in my temples. What did I do? I whispered, pressing my palms to my face. The car raced forward, taking me into the unknown. When we stopped, the night had already completely enveloped the earth. It was a small roadside motel. Dim lamplight illuminated the facade, and somewhere nearby the road hummed. He got out first, walked around the car, and opened the door for me. I didn't move. "It's all right," he said calmly. I looked at him. I should have been afraid. I should have been panicking. I just ran away from my wedding with a man I didn't know. But there was no threat in his eyes. Just waiting. I nodded and got out of the car. The room was dark, with only the light of a street lamp filtering through the thin curtains. I sat down on the bed, trying to process the reality. He leaned against the door, watching me. "Are you sorry?" I looked at him. Silence fell between us. And then he stepped closer. I didn't pull away. He ran his fingers over my shoulder, as light as a breeze. I shuddered at his touch, but not from fear. From something else. The kiss was careful. Warm. He took his time, letting me make my own choice. And I did. It was a quiet morning. Soft light filtered through the half-open curtains, turning the room golden. There was a slight smell of coffee in the air, a cafe was operating somewhere below, and the aroma stretched upward, filling the space with a sense of comfort. I slowly opened my eyes. The ceiling was alien. The sheets are not mine. The silk fabric of the wedding dress, thrown to the floor, reminded of last night. I ran my hand over the blanket, feeling the warmth. He was here. I turned my head and met his gaze. He was no longer asleep, just lying next to me, studying me as if he wanted to memorize every detail. "Good morning." His voice was low, a little hoarse. I smiled. "Morning." He reached out, gently tucking a lock of my hair behind my ear. This touch was so natural, as if we had always known each other. But we didn't know. We were strangers brought together by fate or a mad impulse. And yet, I didn't regret it. I was about to say something when suddenly my gaze caught on the newspaper lying on the bedside table. I recognized the name. It was the newspaper that my fiancé always read. My breathing was labored. I slowly sat down, stretched out my hand, and unfolded the first page. My eyes skimmed over the headline. The disappearance of the groom. The money and the bride disappeared. My chest felt cold. I read it again, making sure I wasn't mistaken. My ex-fiancé has disappeared. He disappeared along with a large sum of money. I swallowed. "No," I whispered. His fingers tightened on the edges of the newspaper. His whole body tensed as if before a blow. "Did you know?" he asked. I looked up at the man I'd run off with. He didn't look surprised. I pressed my lips together. "Did you know?" He was silent. And in that silence, I suddenly understood everything. The silence was oppressive. The newspaper was shaking in my hands, the letters blurred before my eyes. Everything I knew, everything I believed in, suddenly turned upside down, crumbling to dust. My fiancé didn't just disappear. He took the money. He tricked everyone. Me. The guests. My family. And all the while, he was using me as bait, as a way to build trust, to pull off his latest trick. My chest tightened. I slowly looked up. The stranger sat across from her, his dark eyes still the same, attentive, searching, but now there was something more in them. "You knew." My voice was almost emotionless. He was silent. That was the answer. Everything went cold inside. "So you didn't show up by accident?" I continued. "You came to the wedding because I knew who he was," he finally said. His voice was calm, but I could hear something else in that calmness. The story I had convinced myself into, that I had run away on impulse, that I had met a stranger by accident, collapsed in an instant. "Who are you?" My voice sounded hoarse. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. The one who wanted to save you. Or someone who was just using me? He sighed. Maybe both. I clutched the newspaper, feeling anger, pain, and fear mingle into something unclear. If you knew, why didn't you tell me the truth right away? Because you weren't ready to hear it. I wanted to protest, but I froze. Was I ready? If he had told me then, in the hallway, would I have believed him? I looked into his eyes. He didn't look guilty. He was just waiting. And suddenly I realized that he had given me the opportunity to make my own decision. He didn't force me to run away. He didn't tell me that my fiancé was a fraud. He just said, "You don't have to marry him." And I made my own choice. I stared at him for a long time, as if trying to look deeper, to see not only the face, but also the truth hidden behind it. He didn't look away. He didn't make excuses. And that's what broke me. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. I should have known better. My voice was quieter than I wanted it to be. "Yes," he replied simply. I clenched my fingers on the newspaper, feeling a heaviness spreading in my chest. But there was something new in this heaviness: freedom. I didn't just run away from the wedding. I ran away from the lie. From a man who was never what he pretended to be. I raised my head. "What now?" He looked at me carefully. "It depends on you." He didn't try to persuade me to stay. I didn't make any promises. He was just waiting for my decision. I looked at the window. The sun was rising outside. A new day. A new life. I didn't know where this path would lead. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going back. I took a step towards him. "Let's go," I said. He didn't smile, wasn't surprised. I just nodded, like I always knew what my answer would be. We left the room. A newspaper was left behind, carelessly thrown on the bed. "There is a road ahead." The car roared, and we drove off again. The past was left behind, like flashing lights on a night highway that disappear as soon as you drive further away. But everything was vague inside me. Noisy thoughts, anxiety, the question, where am I going? We drove in silence, in a silence that didn't seem heavy. It was a calm silence, as if I was finally beginning to hear myself instead of the outside world. I was looking out the window. Landscapes flashed by, empty fields, tall trees, then city lights again. But I didn't see anything concrete. Everything was a blur, but I felt like every kilometer was going out of my life. He drove the car, focused as always, as if he was sure that wherever we were going, everything would be fine. And maybe he's right. "Where are we going?" I asked with a slight nervousness, but there was no panic in my voice. Just waiting for something new. "Wherever you want." I turned to him, and his eyes were calm, but there was a certain severity in them, as if this answer contained all my freedom. My real freedom. I thought about it. It wasn't just an escape from the past. It was a real beginning, which I had long dreamed of, but never dared to live it. "Go ahead," I finally said. "I do not know where, but go ahead." He nodded without saying a word. Maybe there was a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. He wasn't who I thought he was, but he was part of a new path that I was just beginning to understand. Through the fog of my uncertainty, I felt that something important was going to happen. Something that will change me. And even if it was uncertain, even if it was painful and difficult, I was no longer afraid. We were driving. We were just driving. And that was the first step towards something new. The car was speeding down the road, taking us into the unknown. We didn't talk much. Everything was said, and all that remained was to move forward. I felt like something heavy was going away, something old and unnecessary. Instead, it was a strange relief. I suddenly realized that I wasn't afraid. But in the silence that surrounded us, there was another thought that I couldn't let go of. He wasn't who I thought he was. And it left a mark that did not disappear. I turned to him. There was no regret in his eyes. He was absorbed in the road, but his gaze remained the same, cold and mysterious. "Do you know where we're going?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Time seemed to slow down, and at that moment I felt like his silence wasn't just silence. It was an answer that had no meaning in words. He stopped the car on the side of the road. "There's a place ahead where we can stop. But are you ready to find out the truth about me?" There was no threat in his voice. It was just a question. I looked out the window. A single headlight shone in the distance, and the darkness of the surrounding world did not seem as scary as before. I thought about my past, what I had left behind, and what lay ahead. And suddenly everything became clear. I looked at him. "I'm ready." He nodded. The car started moving again, and I didn't know what was waiting for me. But at that moment, I realized that what we had left behind was only part of the story. And the real story was just beginning.